And I'm fucking livid that we are stuck in the timeline where Alex Jones is right. Kind of worse than it was.
Oh no! Oh, okay, no.
Why aren't the Amish afraid of COVID? Because they don't have TVs.
As I said, democracy is a system that reinforces authoritarian ideals.
I hope I don't get canceled. Talk to you.
Being a victim of a tragedy doesn't make you an expert in public policy.
Well, I mean, AOC is a drama queen and she's full of shit.
Remember, they lost the Afghan war 10 years ago.
You brought a freaking guillotine.
They said, you don't get to tell us no, we're the state health department, and I said, hell no.
It wasn't making Christianity better, it was making rock worse.
What the fuck do you have on your face, Olivia?
You want to make the world a better place? Have some babies and raise them to not be stupid.
I remember thinking, man, governments are not going to like this shit.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, activists, shitposters, and people of the internet, thank you for tuning into a special episode of O'Donnell for Liberty's Review and React series. Today, we are going to have a fantastic, fun review and react to Pink's Appeal, Caryn Ann versus the LNC, and it is going to be one hell of a ride for everyone along. For those of you unaware of the drama, you can go back and watch all of the drama unfold on Caryn Ann's YouTube channel, Pink Flame of Liberty, where she has detailed the course of her expulsion from the LNC for the crime of standing up for member rights. And I don't know about you, but it's just absolutely astounding to me that the Libertarian Party, a party that prides itself on due process and liberty and human freedom, can act with such utter and base corruption at its most fundamental levels. Now, I am biased. This is not an unbiased reaction video. This will not be an unbiased reaction video. But the good news is we just got let in. So we'll see how this goes. For those of you unfamiliar with how the process works, for those of you who are unfamiliar with how the judicial system works within the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian Party, above and beyond membership, has the Libertarian National Committee. The Libertarian National Committee is elected from 8 regional representatives that each represent a group of states, or in the case of California, just the state of California, 5 at-large representatives, and then the officers of the party, the secretary, treasurer, vice chair, chair. The Judicial Committee is a separate elected body elected by delegates in convention that has the power to overrule any decision of the LNC. They very, very rarely meet. They very, very rarely ever do anything. The chair of the Judicial Committee is Dr. Mary Ruwart. Vermin is on the Judicial Committee. I'm not sure if Vermin's wearing a wig or where he is. Carlin asking if he's wearing a wig. Also on the Judicial Committee is Tom Arnold, aka Liberty Claus, and a few other very notable libertarians who've been involved in the party for a long, long time. JG, they're doing the Zoom meeting in webinar mode. It's available to any member of the party who got given the link or asked for the link.
So if you're entering the room now, it's 3:59 by my computer clock. That's Central Time. Yep. And we'll be starting promptly at 4 p.m.
Yeah, so the Zoom link was given. The Mises Caucus sent out an email with the Zoom link for anybody to join. Nobody is going to be able to participate. There is no public comment. The Judicial Committee is not going to take our comments or listen to us for what we do have to say. This is supposed to be an apolitical process. They don't want to be influenced by membership. They're just here to review whether or not the LNC followed their own damn rules, which we know they didn't. The question here that we're going to have is whether or not the LNC
okay, it is 4 p.m. by my computer clock. So
has gotten to them.
Go ahead and get started. For those of you who are coming in, I'm sure you know that this is the JC hearing. This is for the suspension of the LNC secretary by the LNC. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we're going to proceed before we actually get into the meat of things. In the meantime, I do want to really introduce the members of the JC committee. There's 7 of us. In addition to me, I'm Mary Ruart. There's Tom Arnold, D. Frank Robinson, Judge Verman, Chuck Moulton, Jim Turney. Oh, I should have said Vermin Supreme. Sorry about that. Alicia Matson. And who have I left out? Did I leave somebody out? I feel like I did. Nope, maybe I got everybody. Okay. All righty. So we are recording this, and that is so that LP members who aren't here are going to be able to view this. What we are not doing is streaming this. After a discussion with the LP executive director, we kind of decided that while every LP member should have access to this meeting, maybe not so much the general public. So that is the way we're handling this.
Oops.
Your chat is disabled, and that's because this is for LP members. This is observational. We're not going to be taking any comments at this time, but I'd like Tyler to put up on the screen an email address. And the reason we're putting this up is that we know that some of you may not have heard everything that's going on because there's a lot that's going on, and you'll hear more today. And we anticipated that maybe some of you would want to make amicus briefs for one side or the other. We did not want to inhibit that, so we are going to be allowing that. You have until Friday, October 22nd at 5 p.m. Central Time to submit your material. And when you send to this jc@lp.org address, jc@lp.org, it will go to all members of the JC committee. And basically, we're hoping that you will basically limit this to amicus briefs or something that's very, very important for us to hear. We are allowing both sides to submit extra material by that deadline as well. And the reason is that we're going to be asking questions, and it may be that new material will come up during this questioning period. And so we want people to be able to respond appropriately. So as you probably know, the appellant is Miss Caryn Ann Harlos, and the respondent is the LNC. So I'm going to go through exactly how we're going to proceed so that everyone's aware. And it's a little complicated, but we think our intent was to try to make it as fair as we could. So the appellant will be allowed to make opening remarks, to summarize her case, or to present new material, depending on her choice. The LNC will then be able to do the same thing. Now, each party has 30 minutes total for these opening remarks, if they choose to make them, and for rebutting or replying or informing the JC on anything following the questioning period, where the JC will question both parties. We have 2 separate clocks that will be showing during the time that each party is speaking. So hopefully we can keep the time correct. If somebody goes over, then the other party, of course, will be able to get extra time as well. Once we hear the opening remarks, the JC members will take turns in 5-minute segments to ask questions of either party. After that first 5 minutes, we'll go to the next JC committee member, and we'll keep going around and round till all the JC members have got their questions complete. And after that, the LNC will be able to make their rebutting remarks if they choose, and then the appellant will be able to make hers. It may be that the JC members will also make closing remarks.
Now, Caryn Ann does say that this process is totally wrong. She submitted an objection. To me, it's fascinating because in my memory, there hasn't been a JC appeal as long as I've been involved in the party. So I don't know what the process should be.
I decided to make opening remarks instead. And I think my committee members are going to be asking the same questions I would be anyway. So that's how I intend to do that. And the first thing I'd like to say is, this is a very contentious issue. And these are, serious difficulties on both sides. And I don't want to downplay any of that, but I think that it would be very helpful for us to just take a moment and recognize where we are in the scheme of things. And that is that we probably, at least in my opinion, probably more than any time in my lifetime, have a really serious threat to our freedom.
Arvin did not appeal to the
Because
JC
COVID
because
is being
Arvin was
used
never
as a weapon
suspended.
to,
Nick Sarwark
I think,
cast a
even more than
tie-breaking vote to
9/11,
keep Arvin from getting suspended.
Control us. For example, the vaccine mandates are a very big deal. As a pharmaceutical scientist, I can tell you that the person who determines what's in your body is the one who controls you. It is very easy to control people through pharmaceutical means. So no matter what happens at this hearing, no matter what happens in the JC decision, we want to all be together to be able to fight this tyranny. And I say that because of the contentiousness of this issue, there's probably going to be people on both sides who are going to be very disappointed in the verdict, regardless of what it is. So because of that, I am asking something very special of the parties here today. And I know this is an imposition, and I'm sorry, but I have to at least ask. And that is that as you hear your opponent's comments and questions, of course, you're going to want to think about rebutting them. But I'm asking you as well to think about, is there any way that the two parties could by themselves come to some type of compromise or accommodation before the JC makes its decision? Because if that is possible, it will be much, much easier for us to move forward and fight the real tyranny we see today. We are not really each other's enemies. It's our enemies out there, not in here. So I'm asking, I know it's a big ask, I'm asking.
Well, Mike, the focus is on decorum here. That's what they care about. It's decorum, and it's a speech about decorum.
Basically after the meeting as well. And that is all I'm going to say on that. Thank you for considering it. And now I'm going to go ahead and get us started with the actual agenda. So Tyler, if you would, we are going to need the first clock for the appellant, and you can start it when Ms. Harlos starts to speak.
Ms. Word, I'm not speaking on my own behalf. It will be DL Cummings.
Is he here?
Yes. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I was turning on my sound and my camera.
Okay. Tyler's going to go ahead and start the clock. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Jade. Excuse me. I apologize. I have a technical challenge here. Good afternoon, members of the Judicial Committee. I would like to thank you for your time. That these circumstances are the first time we meet is unfortunate. I believe the case before you is of high importance and worthy of your time. On behalf of the petitioner, Caryn Ann Harlos, I will make the case for overturning the LNC's decision to suspend her as duly elected secretary. Our appeal asserts this decision disregards the will of the delegates, due process, and perverts the non-aggression principle, all three long-standing pillars in the Libertarian Party and its culture. Consider the will of the delegates. In 2020, Angela McArdle, speaking in support of Caryn Ann, said Caryn Ann has transformed the role of secretary into something more than simply just a person who keeps records. She's turned this role into a lifeline of communication, and she has breathed life into the stifling atmosphere that so often smothers executive boards when they become more concerned with internal politics than they are with open, honest dialogue and the well-being of our organization. By keeping us informed of what's going on at the officer level, Caryn Ann has maintained transparency for us, the membership, and fostered a culture of collaboration that reaches across caucuses and ideological factions. We are the party of principle, and it takes courage to be principled when it means going against the tide. In Ms. Harlos's nomination speech that followed, she told the delegates, quote, "I will always expose what I see to be backroom shadiness and potential corruption in this party, and that's not always popular." With full knowledge of Ms. Harlos's disposition, provocative delivery, and promise to deliver transparency to delegates, no matter how uncomfortable, they reelected her as secretary. The matter of due process may be the most debated. The LNC draws from a 2008 opinion in another matter to support a vote to suspend the secretary rather than hold a trial. We find this problematic for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, Robert's Rules of Order provides a disciplinary path when bylaws do not explicitly state otherwise. The language in our bylaws for LNC officers and non-officers is identical, but set in distinct sections. Roberts recognizes officers as uniquely different. It is the view of professional registered parliamentarian Jonathan Jacobs, who is on standby if needed, that the 2008 opinion is improperly applied in this matter. Unfortunately, a statement from Mr. Brown, who serves as the body's official parliamentarian, was not provided. Disagreement between parliamentarians is common, and a body may be faced with deciding which position best applies to its situation. But without a competing statement to consider with the information available, Mr. Jacobs' conclusion is that the LNC violated the right of Ms. Harlos to be judged through a trial. Removing an officer is a serious matter, and the LNC failed to provide documented evidence while leading a body known for passionate debate on matters of lesser degree. Reason 2, even if accepting the 2008 opinion as applicable, the LNC only provided alleged outcomes and broad claims rather than specific documented action directly linked to specific documented outcomes. Allow me to illustrate by breaking down each sentence from the summary of the Bill of Particulars. Quote, "The result of this chronic pattern of misconduct by Ms. Harlos has created a hostile work environment within the LNC, LP staff, and LP affiliates. Before describing any set of actions as misconduct, it is necessary to match violations to each item. Instead, the LNC advanced and voted on a large body of evidence disconnected from violations or outcomes, requiring members to assume the conclusion. Quote, her actions have resulted in the loss of established LP members, LNC officers, LP employees, and longtime donors. 146 screenshots and PDFs, yet none offer evidence that Ms. Harlos' actions resulted in the loss of anyone withdrawing their engagement from the party. That isn't to say none exist, only that it wasn't provided. More importantly, without specifics, neither the JC or delegates are able to judge how any loss of engagement differs from other controversial LNC members, past and present. Quote, she has recklessly and willfully harmed the perception of the party and has become a liability to the party's public image. Similar to the previous point about loss of engagement within the libertarian community, claims of individuals harming the perception of the party are common and varied. Members have said the same of the past 2 presidential nominees, along with the past 2 LNC chairs. On the other hand, other members have disagreed. No evidence was provided showing Ms. Harlos' actions contributed to any public diminution towards the party. Quote, her profiteering using her position has undermined the ethics and reputation of the LNC as an all-volunteer body. Profiteering is an interesting claim given the importance placed on Ms. Harlos' words, which I will address momentarily. Profiteering is commonly defined as excessive or unreasonable profits. Some definitions define it as profits acquired in an unethical manner. Either way, the LNC did not provide evidence for either. Ms. Harlos' requests for views and monetary support were all voluntary, and no attempt was made to restrict information from anyone who chose not to support in any of the dozens of screenshots. Excessive or unreasonable profits does not fit. Likewise, no evidence was presented to support the Bill of Particulars description that she made requests for contributions, quote, based on her status as an officer in support of her attacks on the other members of the LNC. The two screenshots alleged as evidence do not name the LNC as a body or any specific member. Rather, it utilizes a specific term, ID polls, short for identity politics, and then shows Ms. Harlos narrowing the term to, quote, the ones who scream Nazi without proof at whole groups of people. I assert this does not describe any LNC member, but they are welcome to disagree. Any responses to requests for contributions were voluntary, the same as may be made by any member, officer, or otherwise. Quote, her continuation as secretary of the LNC would be harmful not only to the LNC and its members, but to the party as a whole. This is a specious point at best, harmful fiction at worst, lacking specific documented actions linked to specific documented outcomes. The LNC is in no position to assert future hypotheticals. Furthermore, on the matter of the 2008 ruling, the LNC's September 19th response to Ms. Harlos' appeal states, quote, with cause laid out during the proceedings, Chair Bilyeu ruled in accordance with the plain meaning of the bylaws and past precedent that the LNC is authorized to exercise this power in the same manner it may exercise any of its powers by a motion being made bylaws and the LNC voting on that motion. A review of the proceedings will show the phrase for cause was used only 4 times, 3 times by Ms. Harlos and once by Chair Bilyeu at the 3-hour, 19-minute and 40-second mark. Quoting this, our rules, we are allowed to suspend by 2/3 vote for cause. There is nothing in there that requires us to give any kind of notice. The 2008 ruling briefly mentions for cause, saying, quote, the National Committee may only remove for cause, but cause is left undefined, meaning that is a matter for the sound judgment of the requisite number of members of the National Committee, subject to review by the Judicial Committee. For cause was not laid out, only referenced, and leaves nothing for review as required by the LNC's own insistence of applicability of the 2008 ruling. Reason number 3, again in the matter of due process. According to our own bylaws, this body is an organization with the purpose to, quote, move public policy in a libertarian direction and to function, quote, as a libertarian political entity separate and distinct from all other political parties or movements. What makes our body distinct from other political parties is our strong dedication to individual rights and our view that the current government inadequately protects individual rights. This creates an unwritten incumbency for our body to deliver a higher degree of due process when rebuking a member than the very entity we exist to oppose. Though we are an organization made up of volunteers, our dedication to individual rights, illustrated by the highest level of due process, is paramount for our public image. We must first offer to our own members what we promise to offer our fellow citizens. As with many other notable individuals throughout the party's history, engagement has the tendency to create conflict, but conflict alone is insufficient as cause. Let's shift to monetizing social media. The Bill of Particulars cites violation of conflict of interest under social media policy. However, no register of declared conflicts was provided by the LNC with any absence of Ms. Harlos, elements from Ms. Harlos, nor was it demonstrated that delegates or the LNC were at any time unaware of Ms. Harlos's social media activities. Ms. Harlos's YouTube account started back in 2017. One current LNC member who voted in favor of suspension was once a Patreon, having since removed himself. 4 years later, with full knowledge of the LNC during her prior term, Ms. Harlos is now told her monetization is problematic. Our body prizes the right of individuals to seek financial support from peers and neighbors, and prizes the voluntary nature even more. No submitted evidence identifies how Ms. Harlos is in violation. But what of charged, provocative, even incendiary language? Our former chair, Mr. Bishop Henchman, once expressed disdain for infighting on a podcast. but also defended it on the grounds that our unscripted nature ensures members have an equal voice in direction of the party. The chair prior to him, Mr. Sarwark, told a story at the last national convention where Ms. Harlos was reelected about a major donor he met at a donor summit. In response to the idea of the party being united, the donor said, quoting Mr. Sarwark's retelling, "We are a political party. Being united is not what we're about. What we're about is that we all care a lot about this party, and we all have a different vision about what this party should be, and we're going to fight about that." So he doesn't want our party to be united. What he wants is our party to be united in fighting in here about how we do this thing, and then turning to the outside and fighting them with everything we have. Without specific documented actions directly linked to specific documented outcomes, it is impossible to fairly judge if any level of discourse exceeds any reasonable expectations. We know our two prior chairs and at least one donor accept, even defend rough discourse to some degree. And when leaders reflect members, as they should, we should expect conflict to arise between those leaders who represent the diverse membership. Even more so on matters that generate strong passion from the members. Passion so strong that it took an entire day to move past our credentials report during our 2020 in-person national convention. Passion that presented itself during public comment of the June 15th and June 18th LNC meetings. Passion that brought profanity and even accusations toward various LNC members, regular members, and groups within the LP. Specific documented actions directly linked to specific documented outcomes provide the highest level of due process. The LNC should have been clear what actions were deemed impermissible, debated them, voted accordingly, and left you, the Judicial Committee, in the best position to adjudicate upon any appeal. This also provides members of the body to make the most informed decision when voting for future LNC members. Whether one looks at it from the letter of our governing documents or the spirit of those same documents, Ms. Harlos was denied the quality of due process that makes this body unique in its pursuit against the state. We are not just an organization full of volunteers. We are what we want the world to be. The third element of our appeal deals with the non-aggression principle. It says this in the Bill of Particulars, quote, Ms. Harlos's public slander and harassment of the LNC and LP members to achieve her political and social goals are in clear violation of the non-aggression principle. All individuals must sign and adhere to the non-aggression principle in order to be a member of the Libertarian Party. Article 4 of the LP bylaws states, members of the party shall be those persons who have certified in writing that they oppose the initiation of force to achieve political or social goals. It does not say officers shall be those, it says members. If, as the LNC asserts, Ms. Harlos has violated the non-aggression principle, that charge alone is sufficient to remove her. But the charge itself fails for two reasons: lack of specificity and its fundamental change to the non-aggression principle. Ms. Harlos is accused of using public slander and harassment of the LNC and LP members to achieve political and social goals. These alleged goals are never specified. Being unspecified, there is nothing to link to the alleged slander or harassment. If the JC permits this action to stand, the impact opens Pandora's box for the party to unravel. Accusations during public comment on June 15th and June 18th were plenty towards the LNC members and even regular members. Members in the LP on all sides frequently express themselves in strong terms throughout social media. By the very standard the LNC condemns Ms. Harlos, many members will find themselves equally guilty and possibly subject to expulsions and suspensions within state and local affiliates. And this chilling effect is not limited to any group or faction and may include any one of us present today. Since the beginning of the party, the non-aggression principle has never reflected unpleasant words. Its specific purpose is to communicate in no uncertain terms that the Libertarian Party opposes any violent overthrow of the United States government. This matter alone is worthy of overriding the LNC suspension vote. the vote to suspend upends the long-standing meaning and purpose of the non-aggression principle and threatens the culture of openness and passionate infighting about the direction of a party that members deeply care about. Passionate infighting that two prior chairs asserted brings some value to this party. Furthermore, the inconsistent application of the non-aggression principle for membership, but dismissal of an officer for allegedly violating, creates a barrier to entry for future LNC hopefuls. There is no angle this charge serves the party, present or future. The delegates voted for Ms. Harlos with the expectation that she would keep members fully informed and bring any potential corruption to them. As the LNC continued substantial silence during COVID lockdowns, Ms. Harlos took it to the members. Her perspective, shared by that of many members, was an LNC in dereliction of duty. Likewise, in the matter of New Hampshire, members were upset by LNC inaction and lack of transparency. Again, Ms. Harlos took it to the members, using her own social media account to gather as much information as possible. Many members saw the response from the LNC and the attempt to remove her then as retaliation against a whistleblower. Whether one agrees with the label or not, they must ask themselves if this LNC response encourages future whistleblowing by any definition. The LNC has made an egregious error that must be resolved. Overturning their decision is no small matter. Consequences of doing so are fewer than permitting it to remain. At the very least, it is necessary to dismiss without prejudice on the grounds of procedural neglect. When the Judicial Committee is unable to review the charges and specifications without further inquiry, illustrated in their request for timestamps for over 16 hours of video from Ms. Harlos's YouTube account, when 146 screenshots and PDFs include screenshots of others making requests on her behalf and includes innocuous requests for voluntary support without withholding any business information for those who choose otherwise, and includes statements from Ms. Harlos's own mouth contradicting the charges against her, when numerous screenshots appear that don't have even the slightest appearance of a violation, including a request for prayer, when several members indicated how they would vote before even hearing Ms. Harlos's defense, and the LNC ignored attempts to resolve the issue through other responses, such as censure or mediation, Ms. Harlos was willing to accept, this can be seen as nothing less than procedural neglect and sends a clear message to those looking from the outside in that this body offers fellow Americans what it does not practice. This view is formally shared by multiple state parties, with Minnesota, Colorado, and New Hampshire, each making formal statements against this action. Though only 0 states made formal statements in support of this action or demanding the suspension in the prior 2 attempts to remove Ms. Harlos. The LNC received over 1,000 emails in support of Ms. Harlos. While you may personally oppose Ms. Harlos's delivery style, the presented evidence does not rise to the standard that our own body demands from the government we oppose. The non-aggression principle charge threatens the very core of this party, and this suspension disregards the will of the members who voted for the same Ms. Harlos that they received. I respectfully ask the Judicial Committee to reverse Ms. Harlos' suspension and reinstate her as Secretary of the LNC. I would like to add one final comment in regards to Ms. Ruitt's request. We would be willing to accept, we would welcome mediation or censure as an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Harlos, is there anyone else that is speaking on your behalf?
No, Ms. Ruitt, we're saving the rest for rebuttal. There might be other people in rebuttal.
Okay, very good. So next, let me ask Chair of the LNC if you are ready to proceed.
I believe the first person who is going to speak is here, Mr. Lucchini.
Okay. So when he's going first then?
Yes.
Okay, so when he starts speaking, Tyler, you can start the clock.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. The cause that led to the Secretary's suspension has been previously stated, a long and persistent continuing pattern of behavior, which is detrimental to the party, its operation, its purpose. As has been noted, the act of suspension supported by 2/3 of the LNC did not result in more professional behavior by Ms. Harlos, but rather an escalation of the personal attacks on LNC members in lengthy monetized videos. Ms. Harlos, as an individual, has every right to engage in this toxic behavior. However, it should be clear that these actions are counterproductive to the individuals working well with colleagues on the LNC board. It's been asserted that there wasn't sufficient cause. The bylaws simply state for cause without further elaboration. In interpreting the bylaws, as in all matters, the acts of the delegates at convention should be presumed to be willful and not accidental. This provision, when passed, was deliberately non-specific. Therefore, it was the intent of the delegates to leave the definition of cause to the LNC. If the LNC had not stated a cause of action, then the JC would be correct in overturning the action of the LNC in this matter. A highly detailed bill of particulars was presented with ample time to review. Yes, there's 16 hours of video. There were many, many days that video could have been reviewed. If the Judicial Committee overrides the will of the LNC based on lack of sufficient cause, that implies that the JC has determined that its opinion of cause is superior to that of the LNC, a power not granted to the JC by the bylaws. In short, colloquially, the JC should not legislate from the bench. The JC's sole purview, in my opinion, the opinion of the chair and Attorney Hall, is to judge adherence to proper procedure. Proper procedure has been followed. This is not a legal proceeding. Ms. Harlos has no employment contract. She has no property right to the position of Secretary of the Party. Injecting complexity into a simple process for suspension detailed in the bylaws is simply making stuff up. So that concludes my prepared remarks. I will make one remark in rebuttal. Ms. Harlos had many months to form a motion and propose one on action on COVID and chose not to do so. Instead, she attacked others. And that is the kind of a toxicity and gaslighting that we all experience. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Tyler, I see you've stopped the clock. Good. So let me ask Madam Chair of the LNC if you have somebody else who wishes to speak.
Richard Longstreth had wished to speak. I'm not sure if he is on board here yet or not.
I am.
Okay.
So Richard, when you start, then we will start the clock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I want to do is, with my time, just remind everybody what the bylaws say. 6.7, which is what Ms. Harlos was suspended under, states that the National Committee may for cause suspend any officer by a vote of 2/3 of the entire National Committee, excepting the officer that is suspended, or excuse me, accepting the officer that is the subject of the vote who may not participate in that vote. And then the suspended officer may challenge that appeal and so on. The fact of the matter is that this LNC, for cause, as Mr. Lucchini stated, presented several different charges in a bill of particulars. The cause was very, very clear. There was evidence supported, and it was given within the rules of the LNC to present information 1 week prior to an LNC meeting for proper discussion. That is how our new business is handled. That is how this was presented, and that is how this is handled. So we followed the proper process. Our bylaws only outline a process that requires that cause is presented, and that was clearly presented and tried. Because a proper process was followed, that means that the only thing that this Judicial Committee should be deciding right now is whether or not that process was correct, not necessarily cause. And I challenged this Judicial Committee to question what message could be sent by overturning the LNC on the question of cause. If you all, as a Judicial Committee, believe that the LNC, that 2/3 of the LNC did not have cause in this case. They did not believe in the cause that they voted for. That is 11 out of 16 members of the LNC that this Judicial Committee would be overruling. It means that 2/3 of the LNC doesn't understand the bylaws if we didn't follow process. It means that 2/3 of this LNC doesn't understand the seriousness of removing an officer, and that 2/3 of this LNC at least is then incapable of governing this party in between conventions. And I simply don't believe that. This LNC has had tremendous success. Further, that these 11 members that voted in favor of removing Ms. Harlos are all from different parts of the country, different LP perspectives and philosophies, with different life experiences. We took an admittedly drastic step to remove an officer from the board, and us as members and volunteers that have worked on this board for a period of time in service of our party do not always agree on the proper course of action at all times. However, we all agreed that the status quo working with Ms. Harlos was impeding our ability to work as a body, and that is why we voted to remove her under the Bill of Particulars and charges that were outlined. Regarding the question of due process, I do want to address this issue as well. I challenge that question of due process not being followed. There was a spirit of due process that was observed by giving Ms. Harlos advance notice. 1 week is all that's required within our policy manual to allow Ms. Harlos to examine any new business charges and come up with an opinion to discuss them. That is the time that she was given for this new business that was presented, as with any other new business that comes up. Our bylaws do not require more, and actually our bylaws require less. All that they require is that we present cause. That's it. There are no other requirements as far as having a trial, having a hearing, or anything like that. It just says that the LNC may remove by 2/3 for cause. We chose to do that at a meeting, giving Ms. Harlos notice. That way she could attend and defend those charges and possibly convince members of the body to not vote in favor of her suspension. Well, I also question, was the spirit of due process observed by allowing Ms. Harlos time for her own defense at the LNC meeting? I would argue yes. Furthermore, we also allowed Ms. Harlos to help craft the way that we presented those arguments. Originally, there was an idea that was presented that we stuck to where 30 minutes were given to each side, and that was heard. It was proposed during the meeting that perhaps more of a Q&A sort of format or a 15-minute on each side format with further rebuttal would be more appropriate. Ms. Harlos indicated that she had not prepared for that, and thus she participated in the rules that set up her own defense during that LNC meeting. And finally, I would also say that the spirit of due process is being observed by this very hearing. We had a hearing as an LNC and we made a decision, and now she has a right to appeal that decision. Ms. Harlos absolutely has had due process and continues to have due process. I urge this body to consider the notes that I've said and yield the rest of my time at this point.
Okay, thank you. Whitney, are there other people who wish to speak?
Yes, myself and possibly Mr. Brown. I don't know if he wants to now or just be available for question and answer later. And if you do wish to speak, would you want to go now or me first?
If it's okay, Whitney, I think I would prefer to wait until after you speak. I might want to make a couple of points, or I may just simply make myself available for questions.
Basically, just to summarize what was already stated from the LNC's perspective is that the LNC acted within the bylaws on authority granted to it by the delegates to remove for cause an officer with 2/3 of a vote. An officer whose behavior, activities, and public performances have continued to create conflict and controversy, promote discord among LNC members and members at large, and perpetuate dysfunction of this board specifically. Those are the things that we were really looking to end. She was afforded due process and the courtesy of notice for an in-person meeting, which had not been afforded to her in the previous attempts at this. She was given extra time to speak above and beyond what she had agreed to accept. And of course, as already mentioned, this judicial review process. The burden of proof now rests on her to prove that she didn't do these things or to establish some sort of defense that these things were okay and that a continued interaction on this board in the way it has been going on is acceptable. We'll see if she's able to prove that and if this judicial committee agrees with it. I think that something was mentioned earlier in Mr. Cummings' statements about infighting being a good thing. I'm going to have to disagree with the previous two chairs on that. Infighting is not a good thing, and I've not heard anyone who has ever mentioned that word use it in a positive light. However, healthy, productive discourse over policy and procedure can be a good thing. So I want to make that very clear and establish that that is not what we have been dealing with over several months. There's a great deal of hypocrisy here that is being spewed, and it is not something that I want to regurgitate. I do not believe this needs to be retried. We've all stated already that we believe that we have followed our procedures. We have a memo from the LNC attorney, LNC counsel, that explains what cause is in this particular situation. And the LNC stands on its decision and hopes that the Judicial Committee will uphold it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to, or anyone else? Richard, would you want to speak next?
If it's okay, I would like to speak just very briefly, Madam Chair.
Could you stop for just a minute?
Sure.
We stopped the clock. I noticed that John Phillips has his hand up, and I'm just wondering if that's.
I have no objection to Mr. Phillips speaking.
I had no other further indicate I do speak. I had not, but there were some points that were brought up that I do wish to rebut.
Okay, John, you're speaking on behalf, you would be speaking on behalf of Ms. Harlos? Because that would be in the rebuttal.
John, you're muted. And you were breaking up, so we're not sure what you were saying.
I would like to speak on behalf of the LNC regarding some of the opening statements by Mrs. Harlos's representative.
That would be in terms of rebuttal, and that would be for after the questioning. So you will have to wait until after the questioning, and then of course you need to confer with, the chair of the LNC to put you in that lineup and give you time. Is that clear, John? John, you might need to unmute. I think you're muted.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. I have it to continually remute myself, and then it won't let me mute.
Okay.
Let me unmute.
Okay. So
yes, it's absolutely clear.
So John, wait, John.
It's absolutely.
John, yes, I think you need to speak after the questioning. Was that clear?
Right, and that's what I'm saying. That's absolutely clear, and I defer to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I thought you were getting started, and forgive me. Okay. So, Whitney, do you want Richard to speak now then?
Yes, if he is so inclined.
Okay. Tyler, you go ahead and start the clock then when Richard starts.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to make 2 or 3 comments. And by the way, Ms. Bildew is correct. I did not have access to the other documents, I think, until sometime this morning. So I am seeing some things for the first time. And also I want to point out that I live in New Orleans, and we are still digging out from under the hurricane, and had about $100,000 worth of damage, have had spotty internet service, and have ceilings collapsed, and we have, it's a mess. But I'm doing the best I can, but there are a couple of points that I think I do want to just do a brief follow-up memo on, and I can actually submit those early enough that Ms. Harlos can respond if she wants to. But to get on to the comments I wanted to make today, I just wanted to point out what I think are 2 important things in RONR. And also wanted to state that although I did not provide a written opinion to this board, I provided verbal opinions to the LNC early in this process, initially to Ken Melman when he was acting chair, and then to Ms. Bilyeu when she became chair. And my clear opinion to both of them, which I think is stated in the brief filed by Ms. Bilyeu, was that the actual proceeding to suspend Ms. Harlos does not need to be conducted under the disciplinary procedures in RONR, that it can be done by motion, just with a regular hearing is a regular motion with debate. And if you were to take a look at the Robert's Rules Forum, where I have over 9,000 posts, I've been a prolific poster for several years. I've done a search for this sort of thing, for whether a disciplinary hearing is required when the bylaws simply say that an officer can be removed for cause by a certain vote. And the responses are almost uniform. I've looked at 25 to 50 of them, that if the bylaws provide a means for removing an officer, that controls, and it takes it out from under the provisions of Robert's Rules. And that is especially so in a case like this, where the provision goes on to provide for the appeal to the Judicial Committee, etc. But one quote from Robert's Rules, and it's in section 56:57, if someone wants to look it up later regarding the bylaws. It says, in professional and in some other societies, there may be an article on disciplinary procedure in the bylaws, and such an article can be simple or very elaborate. I say that again. It can be simple or very elaborate. It does not have to go into detail about how the removal will take place. It can be very simple. That's what the Libertarian Party bylaws say. And then one other comment I wanted to make on cause, on removal for cause. One section that I think is pertinent in Robert's Rules, and it's in section 61.1 and 61.3. In 61.1, an organization or an assembly has the ultimate right to make and enforce its own rules and to require that its members refrain from conduct injurious to the organization or its purposes. And in this case, you might consider the organization to be the LNC, or it could be the party as a whole. And then in section 61:3, members can be disciplined or removed from office for conduct described, for example, as tending to injure the good name of the organization, disturb its well-being, or hamper it in its work. And I believe the allegation here is that these activities have hampered the organization in its work. I believe those were the only points I want to make here, and save the remaining time for rebuttal. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And okay, we've stopped the clock. Anyone else, Whitney? Miss Bilyeu?
I'm not aware of anyone else who intended to speak at this point.
Okay. If that's the case, then I think we are moving on to the part of this meeting where the JC members ask questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the rotation in terms of the way I see the members coming up on my screen. So that would mean that the first question can be asked by D. Frank Robinson, and don't forget to unmute yourself, Mr. Robinson. Do you have a question for any of the I didn't hear you. Do you have a question? Yeah, you're breaking up pretty badly.
I believe he said not at this time. Maybe he can nod.
I think that's what he said too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the next person in line then, according to my my list of people, is Mr. Turney.
I also do not have any questions at this time.
Okay, and then Dr. Moulton would be next. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I suppose I have some questions.
Okay.
So for it might help if people turned off their cameras who are not currently speaking, because that might help people with bandwidth issues. Anyway, I guess I have a question for Ms. Harlos and a question for the LNC. My question for Ms. Harlos is, she seemed to say that under the evidence list, the violations of the policy manual didn't apply. The conflict of interest policy in particular, because she declared potential conflict of interest. But in addition, that conflict of interest policy says that no LNC member, party officer, or employee shall use information gained in the discharge of party duties to the disadvantage of the party. So how is that not something that would be violated by disparaging other LNC members, at dragging the party's name through the mud on social media? And additionally, the policy on harassment and offensive behavior says violation of this expectation by members of the LNC, whether towards other LNC members or LPHQ staff, is therefore especially egregious. And it says any behavior, whether verbal or physical, that clearly offends a reasonable person, libertarian or not, must be avoided. Libertarianism is a policy of respect for the individual and must not be presented as being, in harmony with behavior generally regarded as offensive, and then lists a number of potential categories. And at the bottom says violation of this policy may result in disciplinary action against the perpetrator. Isn't removal disciplinary action? And are you claiming that you have done nothing that is offensive behavior under any of these categories? So that's my question for Ms. Harlos. My question should I just stop there and let her answer, or should I ask my question to the LNC?
No, let her answer. Let her answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moulton. First of all, I'd like to deal with the harassment one. That policy manual also provides a specific procedure for investigation by the chair and the executive committee, which was not at all followed. But I think when you're starting to deal with things where you said something might be offensive, there are plenty of things, including things said at the bar to me by a former LNC member who has since resigned, which could clearly be offensive. And if we ran to the LNC every time someone said something offensive, I think that is all we would be doing. However, the language that I have done, I do think you need to look at the intent, and you also need to look at whether the general party membership would consider it offensive. The criticisms I have had of the LNC hasn't been about their person, hasn't been about their race, hasn't been about their appearance. It's been about their performance. And I think legitimate criticisms of performance do not fall under there. Otherwise, LNC members would never be able to whistleblow about bad behavior on the LNC. And I do think that is completely contrary to the spirit of our party and cannot possibly mean what that says. For instance, if I found out a treasurer, this is not the case, I'm giving you a hypothetical, was stealing from from the party, I'm sure revealing that would be highly offensive to that treasurer, but that would be something that should be said. I do think saying that the majority of the LNC has been absolutely derelict in their duty to oppose the COVID regime, I'm sure is very, very offensive to them. It's very offensive to say you're not doing your job, but it's also very, very necessary for the party membership to know what is going on. It is not gratuitous, mean-spirited offensiveness. It is legitimate criticism of public figures who were elected to do a job. The same thing then would apply with the conflict of interest. The criticisms I have done on my YouTube channel, it hasn't been using things that I have learned in the discharge of my duties to disparage the party. On the contrary, my heartfelt desire is for this party to live up to its goal of achieving a world set free in our lifetime. And we have not been doing that. I would never, that's why I've said I'd never sue this party. I encourage people every day, don't be discouraged by what you see. Join the party and help make it better. Nobody who knows me would think that I have ever set out to harm this party. Now, some people, of course, are not going to like when I criticize their job performance. You want to know what? I have found this entire motion against me. I have found certain LNC members calling me a liar on their social media, other LNC members questioning my mental health on their social media. Extremely offensive. But you want to know what? I'm a public figure, and they have the right to make those criticisms because it is relevant to the membership. They haven't criticized me on the basis of my gender, my race, or any kind of protected class. What they've criticized me on is my performance, and that is fair game, just like my criticisms of them on their performance is also fair game.
Okay, and Dr. Moulton, that is 5 minutes, actually 6, according to my clock. So I'm going to move on and come back to you for the next round of questions, if that's okay.
Sure. In the next round, I will have a question for the LNC. Thank you.
Yes, that would be great. Okay, so next in the lineup is Judge Vermin Supreme. Do you have questions, Judge?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. The NAP, the non-aggression principle, is obviously a linchpin of the LP, and the invocation of the NAP in the Bill of Sale certainly raised quite a few eyebrows, including mine. And of course, the NAP pledge itself just that we all take upon joining the LP describes it using the initiation of force to achieve political or social goals. So yes, I thought it was a bit of a stretch at first blush, but then in reading the Libertarian National Committee Policy Manual Appendices, Section Service to Public, page 70, and I quote, Libertarian Party employees and qualified volunteers must understand that the party is here to serve the public and provide that service to the public in a manner that is courteous, professional, equitable, efficient, and effective, and overall positive, refraining from the negative. Employees must be sensitive and responsible to the changing needs, expectations, and rights of a diverse public in the proper performance of their duties. It is necessary to the positive development of the party to avoid hostility in social media communication, as this can be conceived as a violation of the non-aggression principle. So apparently that's where that was expanded from. The concept seems to be including in this policy manual doing these things, effectively serving the public in that fashion. And so this is a question for Ms. Harlos, and that is, do you believe that you were working in a manner that was at all times, and once again, of course, I'm one to talk, is a courteous, professional, equitable, efficient, effective, and overall positive, and were you refraining from the negative? Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Supreme. If you would look towards the beginning of that policy, it does not apply to LNC members. LNC members are kept completely separate from employees and qualified volunteers. That policy was just recently passed, and it was explained in the meeting and during questioning that it refers to our social media volunteers who run social media property. I am not a social media volunteer. So that policy is completely inapplicable to the Libertarian National Committee. And I will be completely honest with you here. I never saw that sentence where they're saying even volunteers might be violating the NAP, and that, I believe, needs to be struck by the LNC. The LNC has no authority to redefine the NAP in its social media policy or anywhere in its policy manual. That is the purview of the delegates only. And discourteousness or quote unquote mean words are not violations of the NAP. If they are, oh my goodness, the LNC could start disaffiliating affiliates en masse for simply not liking tweets they put out.
Thank you. It was a very interesting leap that was made. And of course, I guess my question to the LNC, anybody who wants to grab it, is that the route that they were attempting to take with the claim that her part of the cause was indeed violating the NAP through defaming and what have you?
Does anyone want to answer that on the LNC side?
Well, I'm not sure if Mr. Lucchini or Mr. Phillips has his hand up, so sure.
Are you saying that you want Mr. Phillips to answer?
Mr. Phillips, is this what your hand is up for?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please.
This actually falls under what I was going to rebut earlier, because the opening statement also included the NAP. And I think we should be cautious here, because if we don't include abuse in the NAP, where are we? If we do not include fraud in the NAP, where are we? The making false accusations against board members regarding their motives, regarding statements, statements about why they're doing things is not legitimate criticism of their job performance. That is a false accusation, and that is fraud. That definitely falls under the NAP. Verbal abuse is a huge problem in our society today. Are we going to tell all these people that were verbally abused and are undergoing therapy that no, that does not account? That does not count as a NAP violation? Is that really what we're going to say? I hope that that is not. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phillips. It's time to move on to the next JC member.
Dr. Ruart, do I not have the opportunity to add to that, or?
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you wanted to. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the policy that Judge Furman cited actually starts out with guidelines for the use of social media by the Libertarian Party. Ms. Harlos is absolutely part of the Libertarian Party. In fact, she's one of the supposed leaders and representatives thereof. So I would absolutely wholeheartedly argue that this does apply to her as well as an LNC member. It also says teams within the Libertarian Party. Then it says Libertarian Party has an integral role in setting standards for social media. So I absolutely disagree that this doesn't apply to her or to the rest of us as LNC members, particularly as officers. The thing she cited where it says employees and qualified volunteers, I interpret that to mean just calling them out specifically as people who have to get approval for things that they're going to be doing on our behalf. But that does certainly not preclude the actual leaders and representatives of the party from maintaining a standard of appropriateness on social media.
Okay. I think we've completed that question unless anyone has anything further.
I mean, is the time up, Ms. Ruhr? Because
yes, the time is up, and you can rebut this at another point in time. Right now, what we're doing is the JC are asking specific questions to specific parties. In other words, the appellant or the respondent, and that was directed to the LNC. You can use some of your time to rebut to address that if you wish. So I'm going to move on to Tom Arnold and ask if you have questions for either party.
Hang on. I do have a question. I have a question for Ms. Harlos. Ms. Harlos, your comments about trying to motivate the LNC to take a stand on COVID because they weren't doing their jobs. As I sit and look over the description of the LNC chair, vice chair, officers, board, it's to run the business of the party. It's not to, and we all know that, yes, they should take an activist stand, but at any time did you make a presentation to the party about a resolution on the COVID and the party's for the party to take a stand on that issue, or were you prompting externally only?
Is that the question, Mr. Arnold?
Yes, that's my question. Yes.
I am so glad you asked that because I did, in fact. Back in December, I had suggested that we create a comprehensive advisory committee to assist the chair and the staff, as they probably did not have the time to chase down all of these leads. And the idea to create a committee was soundly voted down. So I then said, well, I don't need the LNC's permission to create a committee. I can do it on my own. So I, in fact, did go and create an advisory committee on my own to bring back recommendations to the LNC. I brought back recommendations to the LNC twice. None of them were ever acted upon. However, the idea I did come up with once Mr. Bishop Henchman resigned, I decided that I wasn't going to have much luck with the LNC. I went directly to the newly hired communications director, and I presented to her a fully formed campaign called Already Against the Next Mandate. That's what I was trying to sell the LNC on. Beginning of this year, the communications director heard it and said, that is a brilliant idea, and she ran with it. So yes, the messaging program that the LNC is now running, that they removed me right after adopting it, is my messaging plan that I had been trying to get them to do since December. So Mr. Lucchini was absolutely incorrect when he said that I had never presented anything. I presented what we are now using.
That still doesn't answer my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You asked, you said you presented a program, and that's
yes.
all. But did you at any time present a specific resolution? Because it's a lot of your responses have been particularly on the COVID situation.
Yes.
So but you at no time presented a direct resolution on what the board should stand they should take on the COVID situation.
No, I did. If you mean like a formal resolution as in whereas resolved, I think those are somewhat useless. But I did, when I presented the already against the next mandate idea, provided the outlines of the positions we should take, being against mandates and not taking any positions against whether or not vaccines are bad, whether or not COVID is real, to stay away completely from the conspiracy items. So no, I did present a messaging plan. Resolutions to me are useless. They get published on our website and promptly forgotten. However, several other members did present resolutions at one time or another that I certainly supported or voted for, but my complaint was not resolutions. My complaint was a comprehensive messaging plan.
Thank you.
Are you complete, Tom?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, the next person on the list to ask questions is Alicia Matson.
Okay, and I believe I'm unmuted now, and I apologize. I don't have my video functional. I forgot to enable my camera before I joined the meeting. So, but I do want to preface my question with a follow-up on what's been discussed already. Since there has been discussion of the social media policy and to whom it applies. If I remember correctly, I believe the conflict of interest listing that was provided by the appellant listed her as one of the party's social media volunteers. So I want to ask her to address that. But my question is also for the appellant, who argues that one of the reasons we should disregard the logic in the 2008 parliamentary opinion is that it was based on the 10th edition of RONR, and the current edition is the 12th edition, but nothing specific was cited to say what's different. So my question is, can you point to a specific change between the 10th edition and 12th edition, which would directly impact the analysis in the 2008 opinion by two members of the RONR authorship team, which concluded that having an alternate process in the bylaws overrides the entirety of the default procedural requirements in Chapter 20. Is there a specific change that you wish us to look at to consider whether it changes the analysis?
Ms. Ruhr, I have a question for you. Procedure.
Go ahead.
May I divide my response time between myself and my parliamentarian?
This response that you're about to give isn't counting against your time.
No, I meant because Ms. Matson only gets.
You mean for your rebuttal, right, at the end?
No, I mean to answer Ms. Matson's question.
Yes, you can refer to your parliamentarian to help you answer this question.
Okay, I will answer the one thing I can, and then I will ask for JJ's mic to be enabled. My service as a social media volunteer ended during the beginning of Mr. Daniel Fishman's term as executive director, when our social media team completely changed. I was no longer a social media volunteer at that point. Now I'll refer to JJ to answer the RONR question. It's Jonathan Jacobs. If someone could.
Yeah, Tyler can unmute him if he's here in the room.
He is.
I have not seen Mr. Jacobs in the participant list. Is it possible he is in under a different name?
One moment, I have him on chat. Let me ask him. He said he was in the room. I don't know if he fell off. I'm looking down the participant list myself. He's JJ in Philadelphia.
Ah, yes, I have found him now. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, good. I'm Jonathan Jacobs. I don't think I'm showing up on screen for some reason, but I am here. And I did want to discuss just briefly the change in RONR from the 10th to the 12th edition. There has been, and I believe it was in the 12th edition as opposed to the 11th, a change, a great change in how officer removals were treated. They actually, yeah, here it is. I just happened to look, I have it in front of me. Section 6216. This has been a bit of an expansion of how officers have been removed since the 10th edition, if I recall correctly. So they have said it a little bit more emphatically. They've said basically the same thing, but they have said it a bit more emphatically. I would note that, in my opinion, my disagreement is not so much as to whether it was more emphatic or not, but let me see if I can start the video on this. Yeah, no, I cannot. You'd have to do it at your end. But part of it had to do with basically how the bylaws were constructed out there as well. But there has been very definite changes from the 10th edition to the 12th edition of Robert. There have also been some changes in the bylaws. But this has been more greatly emphasized in what the current section 6216 than it was mentioned, I believe, just in passing in the 10th edition.
I'd like to follow up. You referenced a change in the bylaws, and the only change I'm aware of in the relevant section is that it added a clause saying that the person being suspended couldn't participate, but that doesn't impact the question of whether Chapter 20 rules apply, given that we have a different procedure in our bylaws. And that was my question. I believe you were addressing that, well, the default procedures in Chapter 20 for removal of officers have changed, but is there anything that impacts, the question of, given that we have a different procedure in our bylaws, do Chapter 20 procedures have to be followed?
Well, I would say that yes, they do, in part based on the 2008 opinion not referring to officers. This section, including section 216, does refer to an officer, and the position that was removed was not an officer position. So I would not say that these are two like things. The 2008 situation and the 2021 situation were like items.
But given that we have the same rule for at-large and officers in our bylaws, and given
RONR treats those differently in 6216. That is a bit of difference.
But they're all within Chapter 20. So when we have a different protocol for removal in our bylaws, the fact that the default rules make distinctions.
With respect, Ms. Mattson, they are not the same. There is a rule for the removal of officers. There may be a rule, and there is a rule in your bylaws for the removal of non-officers. In this case, board members at large. There is that distinction. Robert has gone out of its way and has increased this distinction in the 2020 edition.
But isn't that only relevant if the procedures in Chapter 20 apply?
Well, that's kind of a circular question that you're asking at this point. Do the procedures in Chapter 20 apply? Is that the question you're asking me?
Yeah. The core question here was: is there something between 10th and 12th that changes the question of whether or not Chapter 20 applies beyond what's in our bylaws?
Well, the question is that under the 10th edition in 2008, did that apply to officer positions? And the opinion there is silent on that because that was not an officer position. We can say that in 2021, with the 12th edition of Robert, that these are the rules for officer positions. That is where you're running into the difference. I would make the argument that certainly the LNC, LNC, or that the Libertarian Party through its convention could adopt a bylaw or a special rule of order that would remove the requirements for a trial. They just have not done so. This does not apply to non-officers. This would apply only to officers.
So you don't believe that the principles of interpretation of Roberts say that when the bylaws provide a specific procedure, it excludes other procedures?
Well, they say like things. In that regard, I can give you a good example from your bylaws. Your bylaws provide for special rules of order. They don't say what the vote is to adopt a special rule of order. Just because the bylaws have mentioned special rules of order doesn't mean that you can adopt them by a majority vote without notice.
But if our bylaws did have another rule, it would override that in Roberts, right?
If your bylaws had a rule that said, yeah, you could adopt a special rule of order by majority vote without notice, you could do so.
And isn't that the issue here, that our bylaws do have something?
No, they don't. They just say you can remove somebody by a 2/3 vote. They don't say how you can remove somebody by that 2/3 vote. That's the difference. They don't outline the procedure. They could, and so could a special rule, but they don't put out that procedure that says how you can adopt or how you can go about removing someone from office. So the rule goes back to the default in Roberts.
I think we've exhausted the question here.
Okay. Yeah, it's time to move on. I know that Richard Brown has his hand up, but Richard, you are with the other, I know you want to rebut this, but that happens during the rebuttal section, not during this time when the JC is asking questions. So if you want to say something and counter JJ's opinion, you can do that in the rebuttal period. So we're moving on to questions by D. Frank Robinson, if he has them.
Point out that the bylaws state that the current edition of Roberts governs. All the discussion about previous editions of Roberts is irrelevant and moot.
Did everyone hear Mr. Robinson clearly? Because I did get a little bit of feedback that hindered my ability to hear him.
No, I didn't hear him at all.
I did not hear him either.
Okay.
Would you like me to say what I believe he said, and then he can nod, or? I believe he said.
All previous editions are irrelevant to the current situation. Do you understand that?
Alicia, did you understand that?
I believe what he's saying is that our bylaws say that we use the current edition of Roberts. So he's opining that perhaps what other editions have to say may not be relevant to the discussion. Is that generally what you meant, what you said? All right.
Good. Okay. Good. And Tom, if you have other questions, if you want to text them to me, I can read them so that everybody can hear them, if you would like to do that. Do you have other questions at this time?
Dr. Rohr, you mistakenly said Tom instead of D. Frank.
I apologize. Okay. So Mr. Robinson, if you have other questions, why don't you text them to me? We have this, we have a little chat going on our phones for the whole committee. And if you will text me the questions you want to ask, I can read them, and that will help. And while you're doing that, I'm going to see if Tom Arnold has questions, and then I will come back to you because you did not use all of your time up, Mr. Robinson. So Tom Arnold, do you have questions?
Oh, not at this time, Ms. Mary. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Chuck, you had another question. Why don't you go ahead with that one, and I'll watch for the questions from Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, I have some questions for the LNC. I'm gonna read a lot here and then let them respond. So my first general question is monetization per se forbidden? Because you've made a lot out of the fact that Ms. Harlos has monetized YouTube channel and so forth and Patreon. Should the LNC service be limited to those rich enough to travel to every meeting and pay for lodging? Several candidates for the LNC in the recent past have admitted not being able to afford the meetings and said they would crowdfund their service. On previous LNCs, two of the following situations happened. Number one, a friend of an LNC officer crowdfunded to attend LNC meetings to cover those meetings for a publication. That friend drove the officer to all LNC meetings and provided hotel rooms to the officer for all LNC meetings from that crowdfunded money. Number two, a LNC regional rep would often miss LNC meetings, so his alternate would sit in his place. At one meeting, another LNC regional rep from a different region wanted a particular outcome in a vote, which the alternate from that other region opposed, paid to fly that regional rep to the meeting and paid for his hotel room, asking for his support on that one vote. So would those two situations be violations for which the officer and the regional rep should be removed? Those are actual situations, not hypotheticals. My second question is, employment law says a substantial reason is required for cause, such as behavior injurious to the functioning of the business, and that it must be the actual cause, not just the pretext for an improper cause, such as we don't like that person. Ms. Harlos has documented numerous other LNC members using colorful language disparaging their colleagues. Why doesn't that show that these are not the actual causes that LNC was concerned about and were just a pretext for other impermissible causes? Thank you.
I see Mr. Phillips, and if Mr. Longforth or Mr. Lucchini have anything to add as well. Dr. Brewer, can Mr. Phillips respond?
Is he responding for? Go ahead. If he's responding for the LNC, yes.
I have just to the second part of that. It was repeatedly stated time after time after time that colorful language was not a complaint. That has been covered ad nauseum. So yes, absolutely, that does not apply because colorful language was never the problem. I'm one of the most guilty of using colorful language, as we know. So obviously, that was definitely not a problem for me.
Can I speak to this?
Please.
So the monetization issue here, a lot of the examples you've given were basically raising money for people to attend meetings. In Ms. Harlow's case, she received money for, I believe, explicitly her mortgage. I don't know of any other case where any officer of the LNC has solicited funding to maintain their lifestyle. It is for the purposes of going to meetings. That is different. Secondarily, the issue isn't just the monetization. There are people that raise money for various things. It's using conflict, acrimony, slander, generating conflict in order to drive monetization. That's the issue here. That's all.
And if I could speak in as well.
Go ahead.
Yes, so the other point that I would want to address is all of us at one time or another probably have moments where we say things on social media or in certain circumstances that shouldn't be said. Ms. Harlos, when we brought that up, it's not so much about any one isolated incident. It was the culmination of the incidents and the repeated behavior and string of abuse and attacks that came on LNC members that is in particular noted. Anybody can have an opinion one off and say something that's inappropriate. That's not what the charge was. The charge was is that it was repeated behavior to the point of near harassment, and I would argue very, very clear harassment at that. So I wanted to clarify that from our viewpoint as well.
Okay.
And if I may,
go ahead.
I just want to bring attention to page 24 of the policy manual regarding conflict of interest, where in section B, it says that no LNC member, party officer, or employee shall B, use information gained in the discharge of party duties to the disadvantage of the party. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about people who are being crowdfunded to go do their jobs as LNC members. We're talking about people who are utilizing information that they supposedly have gained in the carrying out of their duties to the disadvantage of the party by disparaging, casting aspersions, making accusations and insinuations about members' intent. All of those things, and in the process, benefiting either by popularity on social media and or financial gain. That's what we're talking about here. So Dr. Moulton, your earlier examples, I'm not going to speak to those specifically because I'm not aware of those. And that's not what we're talking about here. I do appreciate you attempting to draw the parallels, but I see them as extremely different situations.
Are you complete, Dr. Moulton, on the answers?
I am. Oh, I'm sorry. I am. Thanks very much for your responses.
Okay, I'm going to read what D. Frank Robinson has sent to us, just in case you all aren't able to read it. He says, my point is that only the current edition of Roberts governs under the bylaws. I have no other comments or questions at this time. But of course, we will come back to him in the rotation. Let's see. Mr. Turney, did I get you out of rotation? I think I might have.
Whether you did or not doesn't matter. I still am happy with asking no questions. Thank you for asking me, though.
Okay, my apologies if I skipped over you. Okay, next on our list is Judge Vermin Supreme. So, Judge, do you have any other questions? Judge, I think you might be muted.
Yes. Yes. Hello there. Wanted to go back to that page, that paragraph, and throw that at any representative of the LNC that wants to take it. This expansion on the non-aggression principle. It marvels me a little bit. And now, are you stating in this first paragraph from the Libertarian National Committee Policy Manual Appendices, page 71, service to the public, Libertarian Party employees and qualified volunteers must understand that the party is here to serve the public and provide that service to the public in a manner that is courteous, professional, equitable, efficient, overall positive, refraining from the negative. And then it makes this leap. It is necessary to the positive development. There's a sentence in between, but it is necessary to the positive development of the party to avoid hostility in social media communications, as this can be conceived as a violation of the non-aggression principle. And I was hoping that you could talk to me about that, how that leap was made, where being non-courteous on the internet, and I guess it's clearly in the policy manual, so it's your policy, and you're certainly free to make the policy. But in this particular framing of this policy, I was just interested in hearing a little bit more about how you came to that.
I'll address that. The other speakers on the LNC side may as well. I think, first of all, you use the word discourteous, and that paragraph actually says hostility. There's a difference between those two things. And when people are going on the internet and accusing other people of trying to get them to commit suicide, I would consider that kind of hostile. which is one of the things that has been made public by Ms. Harlos herself. That is not just
I guess I'm looking for a more general framing.
Yes, I'm getting there. I think the point here is that hostility in social media communication can be conceived. I think maybe it would be better to read perceived as a violation of the NAP, which I believe is what has happened here, is that people who are on the receiving end of this hostility perceive it to be a violation of the NAP. And that's what we're dealing with here.
Are you satisfied, Judge, or do you have more to ask on that?
I'm still I guess I'm still just a little baffled how that part of that document came into being, but like I said, it makes sense for whoever made it, and it's just this good. I'm just trying to make the conceptual leap from the non-aggression principle that we all take to it being taken in this context of asking for this, being positive, not negative, can be construed to be literally a violation of the non-aggression principle, and then. But that's just for me. I will process that. Obviously, this case has a lot going on, and there's a lot of things to wrap our heads around, and that is the one point that I'm working on. Thank you.
Okay,
Miss Billy, if I may, if we still have time with Mr. Spreen.
Go ahead.
Well, so where I believe that this comes in is where Ms. Harlos had repeatedly slandered individuals. And when this was brought to her attention, she doubled down repeatedly and inferred that it was her private social media, she could do what she wanted. So even after being made aware that other people were receiving threats and were feeling trespassed on and were having issues with it, she continued, instead of reflecting upon that and deciding to maybe rethink or reform how she went about her messaging, she decided to double down and in some cases make fun of those people or continue to attack those people or put videos on those people and that sort of thing on social media. So it's not any one instance that demonstrates a violation of the NAP. It's her willingness to continue to, for lack of a better word, abuse members of this board. Even after being made aware that there were feelings that she was going too far and that it was a form of aggression, she continued regardless and despite those conversations.
Okay, is there anything more on this before we proceed? If not, next up, Mr. Tom Arnold.
Oh, I did have one more comment. So you are claiming that what you perceive to be bad job performance to be a violation of the NAP.
No, not job performance necessarily. So job performance is one thing, and violating social media policy is one thing, but there's another issue there where it comes to the violation of the NAP that was reported in the case, and that was regarding the feelings of harassment and that sort of thing. So they're distinct charges. So no, the unprofessionalism absolutely still stands. So does the NAP violation in terms of harassment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tom Arnold, do you have more questions?
I reserve the time, Miss Mary. I do, but not at this moment.
Okay. Alicia Matson, do you have questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. And D. Frank Robinson, have you any more questions? You can just nod or type in the chat for us to see. Okay, no. All right. Dr. Moulton, you're next. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim Turney, Mr. Attorney, Mayor Turney. I don't want to miss you again.
I'm not mayor yet. I did just get reelected, but not that office, just a city commissioner, councilor kind of thing. I am very happy with the questions that you all are asking. So I don't have any additional questions that I think would help us. Thank you for asking me, though.
Okay, Dr. Moulton. I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I have no more questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. So Judge Verman, we're back to you.
I will take a pass. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Arnold.
Pass.
Okay. Alicia Matson.
Sounds like we may be done with questions.
I think we may. Okay. At this time then, we are moving on to our rebuttals. The LNC is first. So let's get the LNC clock up there, Tyler. And Madam Chair, I will defer to you going ahead and deciding who is going in what order.
Yeah, I don't see any hands from anyone, but now is a good time if anyone has anything to rebut from earlier. I know Mr. Brown had something.
Yes, he did.
He wanted to say earlier if he is not ready.
I'd like to speak.
Okay. And I see now Mr. Phillips and Mr. Brown are also on deck. So
yeah, I don't
Mr.
know.
Lucci?
Yeah, I don't know how to raise my hand, so I'm sorry for interjecting. Specifically on the issue of COVID response, yes, there was a workshop that Ms. Harlos organized. I attended that. There was a single meeting. And after that, offered to workshop a motion for the LNC, which she declined to do. So this idea that she has ever put forward a formal motion, that did not happen during my tenure. It may have happened before I was on board the LNC. This is just her answer, and the evasions in that answer speak for themselves. One of the major aspects here of the violation of the NAP is fraud. Fraud is lying, and that happens over and over again. That's all I have.
Mr. Phillips? Unmute.
There we go. So during the opening statement, several comments were made. The first was regarding evidence. Now, their case was regarding, well, we don't have this evidence to report to you guys. I can see that thought process, but I would also like to point out that this was not a trial, and that every single one of the 11 of us that voted for this were witnesses to these actions. I don't think that we needed to spend a huge amount of time promoting, re-providing this evidence to ourselves. In addition, Ms. Harlos was witness to these actions, and going on to the statement that we could have censured her, we could have mediated, those attempts were made. We skipped censure, mostly because now she claims it's a joke. I will allow that. At the time, it did not come across as a joke. She made a statement that she would wear the censure like a badge. I get it. Maybe it was a joke, maybe it wasn't. It didn't come across that way at the time. That's how we took it. But multiple attempts were made to discuss things with her, to mediate with her. Offers were made. None of them worked. We have already addressed the will of the delegates. Well, the will of the delegates also put this proviso in the bylaws for removal. And I'm going to call this out like I see it. They elected her to keep them fully informed. That's great, folks. I'm here to ask you, did you ask to be fully informed with falsehoods and bad accusations? Once again, I've already covered the NAP, but I'm going to cover it again. Abuse is absolutely part of the NAP. Fraud is absolutely part of the NAP. And false accusations that have continued to today. And these actions have continued since we voted to remove her. She has not even reflected once on it and thinks that we should accept mediation at this point, I'm not sure how that makes any sense. And then lastly, whether their comments about these rules not applying to her because she's an LNC member. Well, in one point they're saying, oh, well, we need to reflect on how we represent other people and how due process and all those things. And on the other time, they're turning around and taking that back because they're saying that we shouldn't make the same rules apply to our leaders. Isn't that another thing we also represent? So that's all I've got to say.
Ms. Bilu, is there any other?
Mr. Brown?
Okay, thank you. Let me turn my camera on. I wanted to briefly respond to Alicia Matson's question to Jonathan Jacobs regarding what has changed in RONR that would cause the outcome now to be different than it was in 2008. And my response is nothing. And I also agree with Frank Robinson that at any rate, even if something had changed, the current edition, the 12th edition, is what would be controlling. And regarding removal from office, the provision in Robert that tells you when you need to resort to this complicated, elaborate trial procedure says, except as the bylaws may provide otherwise. I'm going to say it again, except as the bylaws may provide otherwise, any regularly elected officer of a permanent society can be removed from office by the society's assembly as follows. And then it goes on to say that if the term of office is fixed, as it is in this case, you can only be removed by going through this complicated trial procedure. The almost identical language is in the 10th edition, which is the edition that was in force at the time Henry Robert and Burke Balch wrote their opinion in 2008. Except as the bylaws may provide otherwise, any regularly elected officer of a permanent society can be deposed from office for cause, that is misconduct or neglect of duty in office, as follows. And it goes on to say that if they are elected for a fixed term, you have to go through the complicated trial procedure. The key is in both cases, Robert says, unless the bylaws provide otherwise. The Libertarian Party bylaws do provide otherwise. It provides the procedure for removing an officer by motion by a 2/3 vote of the entire LNC, which can then be appealed to the Judicial Committee. So the bylaws do provide otherwise. They do provide an exclusive method for removing an officer. That's all. Thank you.
Anything else? You have 9 minutes remaining. So I just wanted to ask the LNC if they would like to have any other speaker at this time.
If there is no one else, I'll, I guess, close here. I just want to reiterate this whole concept of rough discourse being something that we should all enjoy as a political party and members of a political organization. And I don't disagree with that, but there's a big difference between having some rough discourse over policies and procedures and the direction that we're headed and what we have been seeing, which was referred to earlier as infighting in a positive light, which was very strange. That's not okay. When we are it has been incessant, the amount of time that we have had to spend on dealing with personality conflicts on our list specifically, which interestingly hasn't happened in several weeks. I want to just reiterate that the LNC believes that we followed our bylaws, and we even went above and beyond the minimum requirement in this process. And again, we stand by this, and we hope that the Judicial Committee will also see it our way. And unless anyone else on the LNC has anything to say, just want to point out also, mischaracterization is something that also is we stand against in our statement of principles. And I believe that there has been a great deal of that. An example at some point, which I can't cite right now, unfortunately, is Ms. Harlos has made probably on more than one occasion references to the LNC being sexist. That's a mischaracterization, and it just gets to live out there in the world. And if anyone questions it, then they must be guilty of it, I guess, is the perception that she and her supporters have established. So I want to say that, yes, I think that to some degree, there are NAP violations included in the things that have been done here. And we did lay out our cause. Just because someone doesn't want to admit that is not our fault, but it was laid out well in advance of the meeting. So to ignore its existence is willful ignorance. And that's it. Again, the burden of proof now rests on Ms. Harlos to prove that she didn't do these things or that they are defensible in some way. And assuming that the JC, of course, is going to consider the validity of the cause that was laid out, though we believe we were well within our authority to do this simply because we cited cause and followed the rest of the rules that the delegates have provided for us. So with that, I've got nothing else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Tyler has stopped the clock, so we will leave it as is and switch over to the appellant and her clock, and she may rebut as she wishes. So Tyler, if you could change clocks, that'd be great. I'm still seeing the LNC clock. Maybe
I have changed clocks. You should now be seeing 9 minutes and 59 seconds.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it was 9:29 and the LNC's clock is 9:59.
Okay,
very similar.
Okay, thank you. So when Ms. Harlos starts talking, you can start the clock.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to go through a lot of things really rapidly here. I am very, very offended. And if offense is a violation of the NAP and lies are a violation of the NAP, I have just been violated against. I have never, ever, ever categorically never said that members of the LNC were trying to make me commit suicide. That lie was said at the meeting, and Ms. Bilyeu just repeated it. If that's a removable offense, then Ms. Bilyeu should be removed. I provided the video clip to the Judicial Committee that said, I said exactly the opposite. I will repeat to you what I said. I said, I cannot say that it didn't enter my mind, but I am telling you, my listeners, I absolutely do not believe that anyone on the LNC is trying to make me commit suicide. I said exactly the opposite of what they're claiming I've said. That is actionable defamation, what they keep saying about me. And Mr. Phillips has lied about me. There's been no fraud proven. Opinions are not lies and they're not fraud if they have a reasonable basis for them. That doesn't mean people can't disagree. Obviously they can, but can a reasonable person come to my conclusions is the answer. And plenty of members have agreed. And unless they are all also frauds who are violating the NAP, then I think the LNC is a case of, I think they doth protest too much. And Mr. Longstreth called me a liar. Like, there has been so much insults raised by other LNC members that it is quite obvious that this is targeted because certain people simply do not like me. If abuse and lies are a violation of the NAP, they are a violation of the NAP on the first instance, not just the 10th or the 20th or whatever they are trying to say. And I have to tell you, my mouth was agog when Mr. Phillips said, well, we proved the evidence to ourselves. Why do we need to keep proving it to ourselves? Well, you need to prove it to me as well so that I could be able to mount a defense. You need to be able to show it to the members so that they understand why you're removing a duly elected officer. And where it was pointed out that the bylaws do give the LNC authority to remove for cause, the fact is I'm the same person that they elected. I have not changed. So obviously, those delegates that elected me did not think that the behavior that I promised to do from the podium at the statement would be cause to remove me. They knew I was running as a minority voice, and they certainly would not have interpreted cause to mean that a 2/3 majority could remove a majority voice. And I challenged the 2/3 because the fact is they had to rely on 2 alternates to vote. And while that might technically be legal, we have a situation where if the vote was taken with the 2 regionals there, who are the only full LNC members, the result would have been different, even though no one's position has changed. And there is something a little suspect about the way Mr. Sexton was brought in. It was legal, but it wasn't something that we should be modeling. And most members are very, very angry about that. Continuing with Mr. Phillips, who says, I've continued unrepentantly. I have brought receipts since my suspension for every single thing I have claimed. If I have not committed fraud, which I have not, then Mr. Phillips, by his own admission, has violated the NAP against me. As to the issue of sexism, I was only repeating what Mr. Phillips said to me. It is Mr. Phillips who have accused the LNC of sexism because he said there was a distinct difference in the way they treated me and the way they treated him when he used profanity. Now, it's funny that he says coarse language isn't part of why I was removed. The LNC in their vote couldn't even agree on why I was removed. Ms. Sarwark brought up something that wasn't even in the Bill of Particulars. Mr. Phillips denied some of the things that were in the Bill of Particulars. Ms. Hogarth disagrees that my words are a violation of the NAP, but stated publicly she didn't want to quibble about the NAP. They can't even agree over what they removed me over. How could I possibly defend myself? And they just threw up 16 hours of videos and without any timestamps. And ironically, one of the videos they threw up, Ms. Epke wrote me immediately after that video, and that letter is in my evidence, complimenting me on what an extraordinary video I did. Well, is that video abuse or is that video extraordinary? Those aren't the only 2 options. The other option is Ms. Epke didn't even review the video that she dared to put up as something that an officer should be removed from. And I will say I do take offense at Ms. Bilyeu characterizing both what I said and Mr. Cummins says as spewing. Is that respectful and courteous conduct? I would maintain that it doesn't. I submitted in my original documents multiple examples of how that social media policy does not apply to LNC members. But I will submit after this 2 videos that I did. One is where I was concerned it would apply to LNC members before the meeting. And one is immediately after the meeting where I had said that the writers of that policy told everyone on the LNC it doesn't apply to LNC members. So to now use it as some kind of gotcha is extremely problematic. And I do have receipts. I generally don't say things without receipts. And when I say it's an opinion, it's an absolute opinion. It's also a lie to say I refused mediation. I will submit my email to Ms. Epke as evidence where I absolutely accepted mediation. I would also say go to timestamp 5 hours, 10 minutes, and 50 seconds at the LNC hearing where I said that I wanted to engage in mediation. I absolutely, and even right now, will accept mediation and censure. Let the members see what side does not want to resolve this amicably. It is not me. Also, Nick called people Nazis. Nobody did anything about that. Joe Bishop Henchman, before he resigned, called people Nazis. Other party members, Nazis. Nobody said a word about that. David Valenti did the same thing. Nobody said a word about it. This is very much a dirty hand selective enforcement. And here's a newsflash for you. YouTube is my job. I know a lot of people even in my vintage and older might not realize people make a living at that now, but the LNC is basically saying, I can't have that job. And that's just not their lane. You're not allowed to do that. That is just crazy. And I will also say that Out of the 11 members that voted to suspend me, the majority of them were part of the notorious 9 last term, who Nick said were absolutely unbearable to work with, and that the things they were saying publicly about him and about the LNC were injurious to the party, and perhaps even ran away a presidential candidate of Justin Amash. The same people who voted against me were the same people who were saying such things last term, to the fact that our former chair had said, I'm going to make sure none of you are reelected, and put them on a hit list, basically. And they wore it as pride. On the censure thing, where I was joking to say I would wear it as a sense of pride, but it also had a context, even if you didn't think it was a joke. I said, if I were censored for standing up for New Hampshire, I would wear it as a sense of pride. Are you guys here, whistleblowing against retaliation against me for New Hampshire or not? You really need to make up your mind. That's been a problem. And Ms. Bilyeu says it's mostly bad behavior on the list. None of that was submitted in evidence. There are very little emails submitted from the list in evidence, and one of them is me reporting an assault that the LNC ignored for 5 years. What message does that send to other people who wish to report an assault? Another is reporting another phone call threat that I received, just in case other LNC members receive that threat. There's nothing violative about that whatsoever. So there is no violation of the NAP. Abuse is not violation of the NAP. I believe a lot of people on the LNC have abused me with the way they publicly talked about my mental health and what has been said on the list about my mental health over my protestations and official complaint to the party chair about this unwanted intrusion into my personal life. I followed the procedure, though. I complained to the chair to let the executive committee examine it. But if I have been abusive to other LNC members, Susan Hogarth saying publicly, it's not gaslighting if you really are crazy. It's about as abusive to people who are struggling with mental health as you can get. There's a lot of hypocrisy here. And if I should go, about 11 members of the LNC should go as well. Thank you.
And thank you for keeping to time, Ms. Harlos. Okay. I think our formal agenda is more or less concluded. And let me get my video back on. So those of you who want to see a face talking can. I want to repeat a couple things that I said earlier, because we've had a lot of people join us and they may not be aware of this. If you look on Tyler Harris's screen, you'll see the email jc@lp.org. That email will go to all members of the Judicial Committee, and it's up there primarily for those of you who are LP members who wanted to hear about this today and get a little more detail, because there is a lot of detail, and might wish to file amicus briefs for either side. Obviously, we would we want to hear if you have an amicus brief. What we don't want to do is have you please flood our email boxes with, a lot of, comments one way or the other. We do want to hear from you if you have something that's relevant to this case. And then if you wish to contact us as individuals, the members of the JC, you can, of course, go ahead and do that. If you feel like you really need to give a comment to the JC that is not an amicus brief, you can email me directly and I will share it with the Judicial Committee. My email is my first name, Mary, at my last name, ruart.com. And my only request is you put in the subject line about the JC or about the hearing, something so that I know that I'm not looking at a spam item. And so just use our jc@lp.org for amicus briefs, if you would. Now, let me tell you what happens from here on in. The JC has 30 days to report out its decision, and we have already scheduled times to meet so that we can discuss this. Now, both parties and any amicus briefs can come into us as long as they arrive by October 22nd, that's Friday, at 4 p.m., I'm sorry, 5 p.m. Central. So be sure, and if you have such briefs, that you get them in to us before 5 p.m. Central Time on Friday. And the reason that we're setting it up that way is because we start meeting next weekend, and we have scheduled a couple different times for hearings so that with each other, the JC, so that we can discuss what we've heard. Hopefully, we will feel like we have everything complete and won't need to ask anything further. We haven't discussed the possibility of asking anything further, so I'm not expecting it, unless, of course, the different parties submit things that are not clear to us. Then we probably will ask you questions. And before I really help us adjourn, let me ask both parties if they have questions for us. And if I know you do, Ms. Harlos, and we'll deal with that after everyone else is gone. But I guess anything besides what you were mentioning earlier.
No, I was gonna thank you.
Oh, well, we appreciate that. We appreciate that. And we want to thank you all for being here. We know it's kind of tough to have a meeting like this, and I think everybody was, well, let's just say, I hope, I could have imagined this to be going on with much more venom. I'm glad that we didn't see that. I know there were things that both sides didn't like hearing. And again, I would invite you, if you wish, to, I guess I would say, before the JC reaches a decision, to see if you can come up to some type of compromise or agreement that both of you feel is a win-win.
Ms. Ruhr, I am always open to that, and Ms. Bilyeu can get in touch with me. The only two options are not just mediation and censure. There could be others. There's been suggested a voluntary timeout for 60. There are all kinds of other solutions, and I remain willing and open to discuss them with Ms. Bilyeu.
Okay, well, that's good. And like I said, we will be reporting out. We have 30 days to report out. We'll probably report out a few days early just to make sure there's no quibbling about how whether we made our deadline or not. But if you are working on something and you want to inform us of that, or if you need our help in any way, I think we are willing to help. So I want to thank you all for your participation today, including the LP members who have taken time out of their busy schedule to try to understand what this is all about. And I don't think I have too much more to say at this time. I would invite the JC members to speak up if they do. And if there's nothing else, I would like the JC members.
I'd like to say something brief, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
I want to solicit for amicus brief from someone who is, I guess, not enamored by either of the party's positions. In my opinion, having looked at all the evidence, I think this boils down to for cause, and I've said that to both the parties. The parties have both submitted briefs on this matter, and the LNC has basically said that cause can be anything. Ms. Harlos has said cause has to be something that renders someone unfit for office. Neither of those seem compatible with what I've read about employment law in general, which is somewhere in the middle and not at either extreme. Any amicus brief that would shed more light on a good definition of for cause would be useful to me. So I'm just, to the public at large, if anyone wants to do that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Ruhr?
Yes.
I have never received a copy of any brief that was submitted by the LNC on cause.
Okay, I'm just trying to think.
I'm referring to the memo by Oliver Hall.
I've never received that.
Didn't receive
Okay.
that? Okay, we'll get that to you. And again, if you have a response to that, you can make it, just get it in before Friday at 5 p.m. And I'll get that, we'll make sure you get that tonight. Does anyone else feel like they're missing something? Well, if it comes up that you feel you have, just go ahead and let me know. I think if you want to, everybody, both parties have my cell phone. My suggestion is you text me if you have a outstanding concern.
Dr. Ruart, can you clarify? We have some people asking the timing of your ruling. Paragraph 9 under the Rules of Appellate Procedure says 10 days after the meeting. So I just want to clarify if we're misreading this or, or it says as soon as all participating committee members have voted on the matter. So you have 20 days to vote on the matter and then 10 more days to announce it, or how should we interpret this?
My understanding is we have 30 days, and I'm going to ask my fellow members who may be able to be thumbing through something at this time to find that citation.
I can address that briefly. The rules of appellate procedure are written by the Judicial Committee, and I think previous judicial committees and this Judicial Committee have adopted that rule, which conflicts with the bylaws, and the bylaws would be supreme in that instance. So for this particular cause of action, with respect to removal of officers, we're assuming that the bylaw supersedes JC Rule 9.
I agree
Thank
with
you.
Chuck on the resolution of the conflict. I think even more precisely, I believe that 10 days only refers to the amount of time for a JC member who didn't attend the hearing to cast a vote, and also 7 of the JC members are here. So it's an oddity in the JC rules that we have noted ourselves, but I think that's how it's resolved.
And if I may, Dr. Moulton, one more question related to the matter of defining cause. You mentioned that you are looking for a memorandum on cause as it relates to employment law, and I'm not sure how that is relevant here.
We received another. So Mr. Molman, the vice chair, submitted a brief where he got a little bit into cause, and he pointed out that there are 3 contexts in which cause it has been examined ad nauseum. 1 is employment law, 2 is nonprofit boards, and 3 is governmental entities. And they have very different standards for cause. And the question is, which of these is most parallel to what the LNC is? And once you identify which applies, what is the test for that particular level, and how does that apply to each of the causes that LNC has articulated? Do those qualify as sufficient cause under that? And that's what I'm grappling with. Honestly, I have gotten a lot more context since I originally asked that question, but even more context would be helpful. And for me particularly, that's what my ruling is going to hinge in. I can't speak for other JC members. And I thank the LNC and Ms. Harlos for submitting briefs on that issue. They were helpful, but they would also be helpful from parties, from non-parties, people not as interested.
Unaffiliated.
Right, exactly. So I hope that provides more context. But I do thank you for submitting that brief by Mr. Hall, and I definitely learned things from that brief. So thank you for that.
Dr. Moulton?
Yes.
Is an expansion from the parties at all welcome? Only because in hearing your question, I do think there's one of the cases I cited that went in the direction that you're looking for that I might not have highlighted. And if it's welcome, I would like to.
Ms. Harlos, I will forward you the brief by Oliver Hall, which you may not have seen, and you may wish to respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess.
Thank you, Chuck, for offering to do that. Could you copy the rest of the JC on it, or at least me, so I know we've taken care of that?
Yes, of course.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions before we?
I do have a statement I'd like to make. This is going to be a really tough decision all the way around. And I do tend to agree with Dr. Moulton on the issue of cause, but also I do tend to agree with my friend Vermin Supreme on the issue of the NAP. And while I hate to go down that rabbit hole, I think it's one we will have to discuss. And that's something that I think everyone should know, that we don't want to go there, but it looks like we may have to in order to resolve this in a manner that is what I think is right. So, and that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts? I thought I might have heard somebody coming off on the mic. So if there's someone else.
I would just like to say,
Go ahead.
I'd like to say hello to my friend, Jonathan Jacobs. And we are friends and colleagues. And I
Yes,
think
hopefully we'll be writing a paper when this is over.
and I think so. We intend to collaborate after this is over.
And we got a message from D. Frank Robinson, who is saying thank you all. So I want to convey that. And I also want to thank everyone. I think, it's a very difficult issue. Like I said, no matter what's decided, I think there's going to be, well, let's just say, I suspect that there will be trauma on one side or the other, which is why I think if there's any way to come to a resolution, it would be much more win-win than any decision that the JC can make. So thank you for your consideration. And like I said, if there's anything you need to get in touch with me about, or the Judicial Committee, you've got my number.
Thank you. I want to thank the committee and all the LNC members and all of our guests who are here watching today. Thank you for taking the time.
Yes. Yeah, thanks everyone. So if the JC could stay on and the others could go ahead and exit. If that doesn't work, then we'll get on a separate phone call. Bye-bye all. Thank you. Tyler, are you able to arrange?
I did say it was going to be a wild ride, everybody. It looks like Tyler did finally kick us out, so we don't get a sneak peek at what the JC is discussing. But what we can guarantee is going to happen is there's no way in hell Caryn Ann doesn't do a follow-up of her own on her own channel. So why don't everybody check out youtube.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. That's Caryn Ann's channel. And I don't know when she's going to be able to do it. This was a long meeting. We are 2.5 hours in, but I'm sure we can expect a 4 to 5 hour video from Caryn Ann in the next couple of days about how things are going to go. So run over there, check that out from her. Make sure you subscribe and get it from her. But in the meantime, I think Chuck Moulton hits the nail on the head that the LNC is trying to redefine what cause is when they don't have a sufficient reason. And Vermin Supreme, for all of the embarrassment that he does, showing up in a fucking wig and making a circus out of what should be a serious event, asked some really relevant questions on the redefinition of the NAP. And I don't know where we're going with this. I don't know what they're doing this. Now, Top Hand in chat, I did do a video on this with Caryn Ann a couple weeks ago. You can check that out on her channel where we talked about the process and what was going on. Because for those of you who don't know, I used to be on the LNC. I used to be on the National Committee. I was the Region 8 representative. And this is my first term not on the LNC in a while. And what I was discussing with Caryn Ann was a lot of the kind of backroom shady deals that Joe Bishop Henchman, Richard Longstreth, Aaron Adams, and others, Elizabeth Van Horn was a big one. Andy Craig tried to play power broker when he wasn't on the LNC for trying to manipulate outcomes, and the early planning to try and remove Caryn Ann as far back as December 2019. Before the plague, before the pandemic, before the new LNC took power. This is not anything that was out of the blue. And Caryn Ann did submit to evidence to the JC some of my back and forth with Richard Longstreth on a public Facebook post. You can go see where I called him out straight up for lying when he said he never coveted Caryn Ann's position. He never had anything against her. And I just said, fuck it. You know what? I remember the meeting. I remember the meeting where we sat there and you told us all about how much you hated Caryn Ann and you were going to run against her and you were going to be the new secretary. And you'd even asked your partner's permission and he was okay with it because he didn't like Caryn Ann. Caryn Ann says she sent an email to the party chair opening negotiations for other resolutions. I really do hope that works out, and I would love to see it work out. I don't have faith it's going to work out, Caryn Ann. You've become a martyr and a proxy for the war on the Mises Caucus. We all know that. And the Prags are not going to let this die. I'm open to it. I got a really packed schedule. If you guys weren't aware, starting Monday, November 1st, I will be co-hosting the new official Free State Project podcast live on YouTube on the Free State Projects channel, as well as my own show 3 days a week, and then extra videos whenever we do stuff like this. I'd love to link up with Caryn Ann and do another video on that. Dennis really wants you to come back to PorkFest, Caryn Ann, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. As I said earlier on in chat, during things were going, I plan on bringing a whole bunch of packets of lithium chloride to PorkFest, so we can throw them in the bonfire and make sure it burns pink. All right. Well, I've kept you guys for 2.5 hours. It's been one hell of a night, one hell of an interesting run. Make sure, again, you go visit Caryn Ann's channel. Keep up to date because she's going to have something on this. You know she does. Pink Flame of Liberty on YouTube. And stay in touch. Send your emails to the JC. Again, if you want to send your emails straight to the JC, it's jc@lp.org. If it's not an amicus brief relating to the points being made, if it's just a personal touch you want to live in, send it straight to Dr. Ruitt, Mary@ruitt.com. And the deadline for all these emails is October 22nd. So this coming Friday, that is your deadline to send all those amicus briefs and emails to the JC for them to consider. But until next time, everybody, it's been a long night. It's been a wild ride of redefinition of the NAP, redefinition of our principles, and a all-around offensive display of backroom politics. So until next time, you do you, and you do your best to stay free. Thanks again for tuning in and joining us tonight. Make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that big red subscribe button on YouTube and turn on notifications to get alerted every time we go live. If you enjoyed this content, you can join our production team on Patreon by following the link in the description. And don't forget to follow on social media and join our community Discord channel by following the links in the description as well. The best part of all of this is the community that we're building and growing. So go ahead and join us. And thanks once again to our awesome sponsors and patrons for making all of this possible. And if you can't catch the show live, you can always catch it the next day on YouTube, Odyssey, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. So until next time, everybody, be free.